Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another one of my Outlander videos and my review of episode 8 of season 3. So, it is 8 down and 5 to go, and that is unfortunately the downside to getting an episode every Sunday. It draws us closer to the end of the season. Now, this week's episode was titled First Wife in reference to Claire, and it worked on tackling the issue of Jamie's other wife, the one whom I discussed last week as a possible source of an instant yet temporary fallout between Jamie and Claire. Now, somewhere between the ending of last week's episode and the beginning of this week's one, the series did skip some events from the books. Those events were basically complications that occurred in Edinburgh post the print shop burning down and before they returned to Lallybrook. Now, I'll be setting my primary focus on reviewing this episode, but if I've got enough time at the end of this video without making it too lengthy, I'm going to be addressing said events. So just like I stated last week, the reunion between Jenny and Claire was a bit strained and distant. Now, the actress portraying Jenny does one hell of a great job. While she's obviously trying so hard to hide her true emotions, she's clearly happy to know Claire is alive and well. That, though, does not negate the fact that she's still distant and hurt by so many things. At the same time, the return is kind of also strained by the fact that Jamie hid the fact that young Ian was with him when his father visited on last week's episode. That part does wear off so quickly in the events of the episode, with elder Ian and Jamie settling their differences. But Jenny, though, she does stay unhappy and distant throughout the majority of the events of this episode. And it isn't just that Claire vanished for 20 years, but it is also the fact that Jamie now has 2 wives. And as usual, her conversations with Jamie are extremely well acted on her end, discussing it all with him, wondering why he never shared his grief over Claire's alleged death. And Jamie, as usual, gives her a version of the story, one similar to the truth, except it excluded all the parts about the stones and time travel. Jenny, though, does have a solid memory and a radar for bullshit, so she does see the inconsistency in his story. She also references events from the first season when Jamie was taken by Redcoats, and how Claire, along with her, set out to find him then and bring him back. Now, I'm a big fan of the brief yet extremely descriptive kind of one-liners, and Claire did manage to sum up Jenny's capability of going to emotional extremes in this one statement. Jenny casts a very warm light on those that she trusts, and a very cold shadow on those that she doesn't. The complexity of Jenny's character is something I could discuss for hours and talk about endlessly. She does at times get to the point where she's actually my favorite on the show. Now, she's not a doctor or a surgeon, and she might not be as educated as Claire, and she is most definitely not the one with the major love story here. But no one can deny she's this strong and smart woman, and the actress as well does play a big role in how effective the character of Jenny is. So if you want to rely on someone other than the 2 lead actors to give you this vast range of emotions on a single scene, you can always rely on Laura Donnelly. She does as well share certain traits with Claire, like her stubbornness, and most of her stubborn moments are more a product of the situation. They're also a product of her emotions that run wild in a way that makes her character so interesting, even when she pulls her worst. She is as well extremely analytical, very thoughtful, very kind, and doesn't take bullshit or let it slide. And all of that, combined in the package that is known as Jenny Fraser, is what makes her character quite the endearing one. But anyway, I'll be circling to Jenny again when discussing her conversations with Claire. Now, Claire's first conversation with Jamie on this episode extends to present us with his disbelief that she is back. He just tells her of how Duncan Stock of the White Witch and the Treasure had him go looking for her on that island. Now, one thing here that is worthy of admiration on Outlander is the continuous character building and development. And we do, with this conversation, realize Jamie, with all his flaws, is still quite the honorable man. This whole story about his hopes of finding her being shattered and finding the treasure, yet going back to prison for his fellow inmates. Now that went to show that under the worst circumstances, he still made the decent choices. But Claire's side of that conversation was beautiful as well and very well expressed. She tells him that unlike him, she wasn't on an island, yet she always wished he would come and find her. Now, speaking of Jamie, I do understand how a lot of people expect a lot more crying on his end. A lot have complained about him meeting Claire and seeing Bree's photos for the first time as not being tearful enough. But the thing is, sometimes simple reactions and words, like Jamie's on this scene, are less typical and more expressive even if unexpected. I'd personally prefer a beautifully crafted conversation or an expressive stare over tears and crying any day of the week. Now the timing of the conversation as well would have been great, because it was like sort of building towards Claire's discovery about his marriage to Leary. So I personally don't remember how it happened exactly in the novel. However though, if I recall correctly, it was a bit different, making the scene into sort of a cliche. So he's basically right there and he's about to tell Claire all about Leary. And boom, she just arrives in the most inopportune moment, shocking Claire into said discovery. Now Leary, just like she was on the first season and just like she is in the adjacent novel, is one wicked bitch. The last time we saw her, she was supposedly begging Claire and Jamie for forgiveness. And logically speaking, with Claire walking among the living, she should realize her marriage to Jamie might actually be void and null. But the way she actually reacts there makes it clear she was never sincere about anything, including that apology to Claire and Jamie. I think that was on season 2. In the middle of all this turmoil though, what seemed really touching was how Jamie cares for stepdaughters, acts as a real father to them, and makes comforting them his first order of business. He isn't just immersed in his own business, not caring at all about the outcomes to those outside his immediate circle. On the other hand, Claire's stance from all of this is a mix of understandable and purely emotional. I mean, it is clearly upsetting that out of all the women in the world, Jamie married Leary, the woman who tried to get her killed on season 1. The marriage part itself though, that was kind of understandable because Jamie never thought Claire was gonna come back and never knew she survived after leaving him and going through the stones. However though, his "you left me," that was kind of a low blow, and it was like the shittiest excuse he could come up with there, because we simply all know what happened there. But once again, one of those short yet extremely expressive statements come through, and it totally makes up for that low blow I just mentioned. Do you know what it is to live 20 years without a heart, to live half a man, and accustom yourself to exist in the bit that's left? But once again back to Jenny, cause she was totally the star of this episode. The moment she chose to walk in on them, that just made me laugh like crazy. Like I had to stop watching and start laughing hysterically. But now that we're talking about Jenny, asking Leary to come over, informing her of Jamie's presence, bringing this whole thing crumbling upon their heads, that was yet another low blow. I mean, it did feel for a moment there that Jenny was being such a vindictive bitch, controlled by emotions and nothing else. But in her conversation with Claire over her being the one who invited Leary over, she's still smart enough to see that she's not being given the full truth there. And all the way to the end of the episode, she does realize she's only being given part of the story. But jumping to the scene where Leary shoots Jamie, now there was a slight deviation from the novel with that scene as well. In the novel, she never actually intended to shoot Claire and ended up shooting Jamie instead. The case instead was that Claire actually left. Leary came over and shot Jamie. Young Ian followed Claire to inform her of what happened, bringing her back to save Jamie's life. I think the way the show did it was to over-dramatize the situation. In my personal opinion though, it would have been better off done by the book. I believe it would have added to the intensity of the situation. Now again, in all of this, there are characters that are being developed in a very smart manner. Young Ian, for example, has just grown on me as a character on the show. He does happen as well to be really hitting it off pretty good with Claire, showing her respect, making her feel needed, and of course making her feel welcome. Once again though, moving on to conversations between Claire and Jamie. Now telling her the story of how he came to be married to Leary, you couldn't but feel for Jamie. It all just started with her 2 daughters. And for a man whose first child was a stillborn, had to leave the second behind, and never knew the third made it to the land of the living, you could actually sympathize with Jamie. So simply put, he wanted to be a father and a husband, take care of Leary's girls, and he did indeed grow fond of the 2 of them. Now even though it is quite frustrating for Claire, she does understand. As a result, she goes back to her rational base rather than just letting emotion walk her through the rest of all of this. Claire's second conversation with Jenny though was extremely interesting, and it kind of patched up things. The way Jenny opens up about all the blind trust she had in Claire a while back, how Claire was a sister to her, it all just showed how much Jenny has been affected by all of this. And Laura Donnelly once more acts the part so well. It actually felt like Jenny was almost in more pain than Jamie over the loss of Claire, which is quite amazing actually with how she puts on this strong and tough exterior. However though, with the annulment of Leary's marriage to Jamie, it is time to move on to the next chapter of the story. Now there are still emotional residues that Claire and Jamie will have to deal with, even though Jamie kind of reassures her at the very end. But after all, it does make sense that they have both changed, and not just Jamie. And even though they're still both madly in love with one another, they have to find a way to reconcile those changes and make their peace with them. Now, one last topic to discuss here is Jamie, the alimony, young Ian, and the treasure. Now, the situation with the treasure there was kind of different in the books. The reveal was kind of made to Claire after the alimony situation came up, and not before it. The family did know about the treasure as well before that point, and did actually borrow from it. However though, just like in the episode, that was actually young Ian's first trip to the island. Now we're gonna be seeing Claire and Jamie embark on their first real adventure this season, trying to find out more about Ian's whereabouts and tracking him. We're also gonna be seeing Leary's eldest daughter, Marcelly, in the future, so there is more to come on that front as well. And all that is to come, in my opinion, is really the fun part of this season. We are actually gonna be departing from the plain romance part and entering the romances part of an overall much bigger story. That is, however, all I've got on this episode. I apologize for my voice. I have this nose, throat, the whole 9 yards infection basically, and I barely can breathe here. But do let me know what you thought of this episode, and if there's anything I've missed, let me know as well what your favorite moments on this episode were. And remember, it is always much appreciated if you crown my effort with your likes to this video, and if you subscribe and enable notifications for my future videos as well. And until I see you next time, thank you all for watching, and have a good one.